Hello YouTube and welcome to another supercharger intake manifold building video. If you've been following this series, then you will already know that I'm building this intake manifold so that I can put a supercharger on my Kawasaki X2 engine. And it has been going quite well, but it's also taking quite a long time. I believe this is the 7th or 8th video in this series, and it's taken quite a while because I'm being quite particular about it and because this is my first aluminum welding project ever. I just got a TIG welder, and so I'm very new to this. I have made a lot of errors in the building of this. I've learned a lot from making it. Fortunately, none of the errors that I've made so far are critical and will stop me from being able to use this. But I'll mention a few things right off the bat just before we get into the video. I basically made two main mistakes in building this manifold. The first one is that I jumped into building before doing a lot of practice, but honestly, welding aluminum together is quite expensive when you calculate in the cost of the argon gas and the material itself. So I jumped into welding things together before I had a lot of experience, and what that leads to is somebody who welds very slowly, and when you weld very slowly, you put a lot of heat into the material. When you put a lot of heat into the material, you get warpage. Also, the second thing that I did was I made angles that were too steep and made some areas that were very hard to weld. The best example of that is when I welded in the feed tube. Basically, I created a huge void with a very steep angle in there that was very hard to weld, so I had to fill up this whole area. It dumped a whole lot of heat into the part, and that caused some warpage. None of these dimensions are terribly critical, and I can work around this, but it is quite clearly warped here. You can see it's quite a gap in the center and touching on both sides. This was a factory machined edge that was perfectly straight when I put it on there, but I dumped a bunch of heat into it welding along here and it warped. Also, the angle of this part here, I don't know if you can tell, but the angle of this side is swept in quite a bit, and the reason for that is once again dumping a whole bunch of heat into that caused this to pull in together and warp the side here. So when you're welding with a TIG welder, if you're welding along an inside joint, you're welding in along here a 90 degree, you can actually get the tungsten out enough so that you can get the arc down into that joint. It's a little bit difficult, but you can do it. But when you start getting really steep angles, if I have an angle that's beyond 90. So if you have like a 45 degree angle, that's kind of doable for an experienced welder, but it makes it a lot harder to get the torch. I know you guys can't see, but I hope you get the idea. You can't get the torch down in there to get the bead of weld actually in on the metals, and so your arc starts jumping back and forth, and the only real choice that you have, other than waiting until you're a good welder, is to fill up the whole gap. So you have to fill this area instead of going down in there and filling that area. With that being said, I'm going to move on with the next step of this project, which is designing and building the water jacket for the outside of the manifold. So I've come up with a rough plan in my head, but I'm assuming, just like all of my other plans, that is going to get changed along the way. So I want to have enough volume in the water jacket so that it actually has enough volume of water so that it can cool it down. But I don't want it to be so big that it gets in the way of things. And I also don't want it to be so big that I need to do a bunch of modifications to actually get the bolts in. So what I have to do now is take some measurements, cut out a piece of aluminum, and start bending. I'm going to try to bend everything together and make it work. If that doesn't work, then I might have to do some cuts and weld it together. I already opened one of my parcels, and I think this is some stuff for my welder. Oh, this is from Lyle. Oh, that's cool. This is not what I thought it was. This is the rack assembly for my Lyle hone. The guy sent me a brand new set of racks for my Lyle hone because I was having issues with the originals. Very nice people to do business with. I would highly recommend that if you need to purchase a product, a tool, I would suggest Lyle because, well, they take care of their customers. And the next thing that I have, I've already opened it. I wanted to make sure that there was nothing personal, no personal information. So this is from Zach. He sent me the starter Bendix bushing for my 1100 engine and also some reeds. I haven't actually unwrapped or looked at these yet, but that's in really good shape. Nice to have that. Beautiful. There's a number 2. We got some packing paper. Make sure I don't lose anything here. And there's number 3. There you have it. A beautiful set of reeds for my 1100 build. Thank you very much, Zach, for that. Much appreciated. They will definitely be used. They will come in handy. All right, let's get on with the supercharger build. 175. 185 is 5 on each side. I'm gonna go 195. Before I go any further, I'm going to cut this off so that it's easier for me to figure out where the template goes. So I think probably for the first rough cut, I'm going to use the jigsaw, and then I'm going to have to do some shaping with probably the die grinder and a file. So I'm going to mark it at 10 millimeters. And then the sides are actually going to get bent from 10 millimeters down here to 6 millimeters at the top. So that's 10 millimeters where they intersect there, and then 6 millimeters at the top. And then I got to figure out how I'm going to make my bends and my cuts. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut out a notch in each corner. So I'm going to cut out the 10 by 10 square in this corner, 10 by 10 square in this corner, and then I'm going to attempt to bend these ends. And hopefully I can bend them fairly accurately. I'm assuming that I'm going to have to use a hammer to tap on it. I'm going to try to do this. I'm not sure if it's actually going to work. All right, let's see how this goes. Kind of nervous. Please don't break. All right, for now I'm just gonna leave. Oh man, it is breaking. It's definitely gonna need welding, but that's okay because I got a welder. All right, let's do this. Try to do it in one motion, maybe that way it will work better for me. All right. All right. It looks like that was pretty successful. Those are some nice bends. The only problem is now that I'm going to have to weld on the inside of these seams. And as you guys have seen from my welds, I'm not exactly an expert welder. So it's going to be a little bit tricky. Now that I have this piece basically shaped and I know that that method works, I'm now going to trim some of this excess material off. I'm going to start with the bandsaw and then touch it up with the belt sander. I'm going to take a piece of 1/2-inch aluminum that almost ripped my hand off last week. I'm going to drill the inside of it out to 3/8. And then I'm going to basically use it to fill in a gap in the center of this that will hold this out. It will be the feed tube and it will also be the spacer in the center. This probably isn't going to be straight, so what I'm going to do is lightly mark it on this side and then move over here and see how much it is off. Maybe, no, that's actually pretty straight. All right, I'm going to try to do a straight cut here. Could be tricky. Done! I got daydreaming while I was playing around with this thing and it took me way longer than it should have, but it turned out well and I didn't hurt myself, so I guess that's all that really matters. I've got to cut an angle on the bottom of this. I think I will just do it with the belt sander because it won't take that long. I started doing some welding with the camera off because I didn't want to show you guys a whole bunch of hours of welding. So I'm going to fill in these areas and along here and this. Anyway, I turned the camera on because I'm pretty proud of this weld. I kind of just did this as a practice bead. Actually, I started here because there was already a fair amount of buildup here. So I started here and worked my way all the way across, and then it looked so good that I went back and started here and came all the way through. But this is probably what I'm most proud of, welding around this the top of this pipe. I know that it doesn't look like much, but there's a thin material here and then there's a really thick piece and there's a gap in through here, so yeah, it was kind of tricky. Still not 100% convinced that there's nothing wrong with my welder. After I start to weld for more than a few minutes at kind of higher amps, it like turns on and off, or like the AC, it switches over to DC. I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to continue on and do some other stuff off camera. I'm going to weld these holes up. There's one on each side. I'm going to try real hard to fill these in. And then I'm probably going to touch some stuff up here just to make it look prettier. Alright YouTube, I kind of don't even want to tell you guys this, but it is currently 3:02 in the morning. I think it was 9 o'clock, 9 or 10 o'clock the last time I recorded a clip. So that's how long I've been struggling to get this thing welded up. I did make a lot of progress. A lot of the welds that I did were extremely tricky, but I still have one of the hardest welds to do. I'm leaving it because Well, it's 3 a.m. and it's not going to get any easier when I can't think straight. I did get around these pins done. That was actually fairly easy. Had a little bit of a struggle, but what I had the most trouble with is trying to fill in these little holes on the sides. Trying to get in through here with the TIG torch and then be able to... That's the other thing. Getting in there is the first problem. And then actually being able to get filler rod in at it is the second problem. So I just finished welding up around here. I'm not sure if you guys can see that, but I just finished up welding around here on the inside, which I wanted to do to be 100% sure that I don't leak any boost pressure out around the bottom. I ended up machining out around these bottom bolt holes. I know that you can't see all of them, but I machined out around them just to make sure I had good clearance for a socket. And to make sure that it doesn't leak any boost pressure, I want to weld around the bottom of here so that it's sealed from the inside and the outside. I'm quite happy with how my welds are going though. I am getting a lot better at laying a bead. All this working in really tight, miserable spaces, I think is making me better at handling the torch. But my biggest problem, and I will admit it, my biggest problem is that I don't have the patience to set stuff up properly. I have all this mess here and I'm pulling on my hose and it's getting caught on stuff and then I get mad about it and yeah, anyway. Even though it didn't go terribly well, I made a lot of progress and I am happy with it. So I guess it's sleep now, get up tomorrow and yeah, try to do some more work. I got a full tank of argon. I almost used 500 psi out of it. They come charged with 2000 psi and I've got it down almost to 1500 already. So yeah, a lot of mistakes, a lot of broken tungstens, a lot of stuck tungstens, a lot of dipping. Pretty nasty, but good progress.